nje kabisa zile bureaucracy za protocols za kiserikali. Tupo sisi hapa wanazaki, si ndio? Kwa hiyo kwa mujibu wa ratiba yetu, neno la kwanza kama kawaida yetu la utangulizi litatoka kwake Executive Director FCS.
Naona tumelala sana. Tungesimama tuimbe ile nyimbo yetu ya kizalendo kidogo. Na sijui nani hapa mwenye sauti nzuri. Nitajitahidi. Tuimbe Tanzania Tanzania beti moja tu kutuamsha kwamba tuko Arusha na hii ni wiki ya Azaki, wiki ya wananchi na maendeleo. Kwa hiyo nitaanza beti moja tu, sawa 1, 2, 3. Tanzania Tanzania, nakupenda kwa moyo wote. Tupige na makofi tufurahi jamani Nchi yangu Tanzania, na yako ni tamu sana. Nilalapo na kuota wewe, niamkapo ni heri mama we. Tanzania Tanzania, nakupenda kwa moyo wote. Tujipige makofi mengi na tunaweza tukakaa. Kama alivyosema MC, kazi yangu asubuhi hii ni kuwakaribisha Arusha. Hii ni mara ya kwanza CSO wiki tunafanyia hapa Arusha. Lakini pia la msingi kuliko yote, mwaka huu CSO wiki ya mwaka huu inafanyika kwa tofauti kidogo. Na inafanyika katika kipindi ambacho tumetoka kuwa na mkutano mkubwa sana wa kimkakati kati yetu sisi na serikali unaoitwa NGO Forum, na tulifanya wengi tulishiriki na tukafanya vizuri sana. Kwa hiyo tunapokuja kwenye CSO wiki tukasema CSO wiki tuilete kwa wananchi. Kwa hiyo kazi ya wiki hii itakuwa ni sisi kuongea na wananchi. Lakini kwa namna pekee sana meza kuu imetambuliwa, lakini kwa namna pekee sana nimtambulishe mgeni wetu rasmi leo ambaye si mwingine bali ni Dr. Anthony Mveyange. Naomba usimame na tafadhali makofi mengi kwake mgeni wetu rasmi leo, ambaye ndiye atatuongoza kutuchangamsha na kutupa hamasa, lakini pia kutufikirisha kuhusu maendeleo ya watu maana yake nini. Asante sana daktari. Lakini kabla sijaendelea, ningependa kuwatambulisha kwenu moja na niwashukuru. Kazi yote mnayoona hapa Arusha wiki hii isingeweza kufanyika na foundation peke yake, kwa sababu hii wiki ya Azaki ni wiki ya kwetu sote. Na kwa kweli tusingeweza sisi foundation peke yetu. Kwa hiyo ningeomba niwatambulishe steering committee iliyofanya kazi kubwa ya kuandaa kazi hiyo. Sasa kwa sababu tuko wengi, nitataja majina, baadaye tutaweza kuwashangilia wote kwa pamoja. Kwanza kabisa nianze na sisi wenyewe Foundation for Civil Society, Twaweza, LSF, Legal and Human Rights Center, Malala Fund, CBM, Redefine, TGNP, Wajibu, D-Lab, Amani Girls Home, Haki Rasilimali, Police Forum, UNA Tanzania, Freedom House, Restless Development, Save the Children, Plan International, Tanganyika Law Society, Norwegian Church Aid, Wildaf, Media Convergency, ANSAF, Girls Effect, Haki Elimu, Shivawata, Tango na Kongo. Hawa ndio waliokuwa steering committee. Kwa kweli wamefanya kazi kubwa sana. Naomba tuwapigie makofi mengi kuwapa pongezi na shukrani. Ndio waliweza kufanikisha tuwepo hapa asubuhi hii. Lakini pia kuna sponsors wetu, na kwa namna pekee sponsors wetu wametoka sehemu mbalimbali, wadau wa maendeleo, lakini pia hata wadau kutoka sekta binafsi. Kwa haraka majina yao napenda kuwatambua: GIZ, World Ganzen, Ford Foundation, UNDP, Stanbic Bank, IOGT, NTC Movement, African Court Coalition, Vodacom Foundation, Umati, Tanzania Human Rights Defenders, TCHS, Aris Insurance, Enson Africa ambao ni auditors, USAID, PAT na Clouds FM. Na wenyewe tuwapigie makofi mengi sana kwa shukuru. Na kundi la mwisho development partners ambao ni wawili, ubalozi wa Denmark na ubalozi wa Uswizi. Na wenyewe tuwapigie makofi mengi sana. Baada ya kuwatambua steering committee members, sponsors wetu na development partners, napenda tena kuwakaribisha Arusha. Lakini kwa sababu ambazo nimesema mwanzoni, hii ni wiki ya sisi kama Azaki, wiki ya kujitazama, na hata structure yetu ya ufunguzi imechukua sura hiyo. Kwa hiyo tutakuwa na ratiba yetu kwenye huu ufunguzi. Kutakuwa na neno kutoka kwa President of Foundation for Civil Society kama opening remark, lakini pia neno kutoka kwa wenzetu wa private sector ambao wametusupport kwa mara ya kwanza. Tunafurahi sana Stanbic wako na sisi. Lakini pia tutakuwa na mazungumzo au hotuba kuu itakayotolewa na Dr. Mveyange. Sasa kwa kifupi sana niwatambulishe kwenu Dr. Mveyange ni nani. Dr. Mveyange yeye ni Mtanzania mwenzetu, na kwa sasa hivi anafanya kazi na shirika moja linaitwa Partnership for African Social and Governance Research ambayo makao makuu yako Nairobi. Kabla ya hapo ameshawahi kufanya kazi na Trademark East Africa kama Director of Research, na yeye ni mchumi ambaye amebobea katika masuala ya poverty, inequality. Amebobea zaidi katika masuala ya inequality, masuala ya kuondoa umaskini, masuala ya afya, elimu, kilimo, mambo ya rasilimali, biashara za kimataifa, sera za kibiashara, uchumi na mambo mbalimbali ya maendeleo. Na ukiacha kazi alizofanya au kazi anayofanya sasa hivi, yeye pia ni mtaalamu mwelekezi na ameshafanya kazi na mashirika mengi ya kimataifa ikiwemo World Bank. Ameshafanya kazi na shirika moja linaloitwa Amref Africa na ameshafanya kazi pia na serikali ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, Kenya na taasisi zingine. Hii ni kwa kifupi sana. Huyu ndio Dr. Anthony Mveyange ambaye atakuwa mzungumzaji mkuu asubuhi hii. Na mimi bila kupoteza muda niwakaribishe sana Arusha, na niseme wiki hii itakuwa ni wiki ya mafanikio kama wote tutaweka juhudi zetu kwa pamoja, tutaweka mazungumzo yetu kwa pamoja, na tujitazame sisi kama sekta tumetoka wapi, sasa hivi tuko wapi, na tunawezaje kwenda mbele vizuri zaidi. Baada ya kusema hayo, narudisha kwako MC. Azaki oye! Asanteni sana.
Azaki oye! Kumbe hiyo bado ipo Sawa kabisa. Kwa hiyo kaka Kiwanga, unataka katika majadiliano yetu, mazungumzo yetu tuwe wawazi kabisa. Haya, sawa. Basi na hilo tunaliongezea. Asante sana. Naomba nikaribishe basi neno kutoka kwa mshirika wetu kutoka private sector. Nimesha kutambulisha ndugu yetu kutoka Stanbic. Naomba nikukaribisha hapa mbele hivi sasa basi nawe uweze kutoa neno, tuweze kukusikiliza na tukupigie makofi mengi sana. Karibu sana 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 hapa mbele ndugu Molel.
Jamani, habari zenu? Turudie tena. Habari zenu? Tuko bado kidogo chini. Habari zenu? Hapo sawa. Mgeni rasmi, kamati ya maandalizi, viongozi wa taasisi mbalimbali, wadau wa maendeleo, wanahabari, wageni waalikwa, na wasalimu kwa jina la Muungano wa Tanzania. Kazi iendelee kwa kweli. Niko mbele yenu kutoa salamu maalum kutoka sekta binafsi. Lakini naomba nianze kwa kuambia msemo maarufu ambao unasema ukitaka kwenda kwa haraka nenda peke yako, ukitaka kwenda au kufika mbali nenda na wenzako. Nitabadilisha hapo mwisho kidogo na kusema badala ya kwenda na wenzako nenda na walio wako. Namaanisha nini? Walio wako wanaweza kuwa wanaoamini unachokiamini, wanaosukuma gurudumu unalosukuma, na ninapomaanisha gurudumu namaanisha maendeleo endelevu, usawa na haki na maendeleo ya watu. Kama leo tulivyo hapa tunaongelea kuhusu maendeleo ya watu pamoja na maendeleo endelevu. Lakini katika hayo yote kuhusu hilo gurudumu kuna vitu vitatu vimeshikilia hilo jiwe la pembeni hilo la wananchi au maendeleo ya watu, ambayo ni serikali, azaki pamoja na sekta binafsi. Na sisi kama Stanbic Bank ambao ni moja ya sekta binafsi tumekaa barani Afrika kwa muda wa miaka 160 sasa. Mwaka huu tumefikisha miaka 160. Na hapa Tanzania tangu mwaka 1995. Kutoa huduma za kibenki ambazo tunazifanya vizuri kwa kila siku, tuna huduma ambazo ni zaidi ya benki. Na huduma hizo zinasukumwa na imani yetu kwamba tunakuza jamii tunayoihudumia. Sehemu ya kukuza jamii hiyo ni kuwepo katika mijadala kama hii na kuchagiza maendeleo ya watu. Rai yetu kama benki ni kushiriki au kuhakikisha tunashiriki katika mijadala na kuendelea kushirikiana na wengine wanaosukuma maendeleo ya Tanzania. Kujumuika kwetu au kutengeneza jumuiya za kusogeza gurudumu la maendeleo kuna sura mbalimbali. Mojawapo ni hii ambayo tunasimamia leo au niko mbele yenu kuisimamia, ambayo ni kitengo chetu wezeshi kwa biashara ndogo, kati, wajasiriamali, wabunifu na Dadasha tansaidia startup. Tunachokifanya ni kuhakikisha jamii hii inachukua fursa ambazo zinatokana na uwekezaji, strategic investment projects, lakini pia tunahakikisha wabunifu wanaweza kupata soko, commercializing innovation, na mwisho kabisa tunahakikisha kwamba katika hivyo vyote basi wanapata huduma zaidi ya kifedha, non-financial services. Na kwa vile tunataka kufika mbali, basi tunaahidi kushiriki katika wiki hii ya Azaki kikamilifu na kuhakikisha tunaleta sio maendeleo tu, maendeleo watu. Sisi kama Stanbic tuna kauli mbiu yetu inasema inawezekana. Kwa hivyo naomba ni echo leo na kusema kwamba tunaamini inawezekana. Asanteni sana.
Safi kabisa. Sasa hapa ulianza na ile salamu maarufu mashuhuri ya nchi yetu. Inasema jina la Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. Mnaonaje sisi hapa kwenye kikao chetu tukisema wananchi waendelee? Inakuja? Inakubalika? Inawezekana? Watu kwa? Safi kabisa. Rais FCS Dr. Tenga, makofi yetu mengi sana tafadhali. Neno la utangulizi, na nitaomba tafadhali sana uwe na heshima ya kumkaribisha mgeni rasmi ambaye ametambulishwa vizuri kabisa. Karibu sana na tukusikilize.
Wananchi, ndio tumeanza jamani. Wananchi, wananchi, nimeombwa kumkaribisha kaka yangu Anthony, lakini sitachelea pia kuwakaribisha kaka zangu na dada zangu mlioko hapa. Karibuni sana katika wiki ya Azaki, na nikaribishe pia meza kuu kaka zangu na dada zangu na mdogo wangu Francis, lakini ni bosi wangu huyu. Karibuni sana kwenye wiki ya Azaki. Nimefurahi sana kuona na mimi nimepata fursa ya kutoa sauti. Tumesema people's stories. So this is my story. Na mimi nakuwa na nafasi ya kutoa story hapa leo. Na story yangu ni ya ukaribisho. Na nilipo ambiwa na Francis, ilikuwa Jumaa Francis au Jumamosi, kwamba tungeomba uje utoe neno la kukaribisha. Nikasema hebu naomba nijue mnataka kupata nini, concept ni nini. Akasema concept ipo, lakini lengo letu kubwa sisi ni kuimarisha ushirikiano. Akasema ushirikiano upi kati ya Azaki na serikali, kati ya Azaki na bunge, kati ya Azaki na Azaki zingine, lakini pia kati ya Azaki na wananchi. Nikasema asante sana. Sasa nikaanza, toka wakati ule nilikuwa nikiwaza tu mpaka sasa mimi naona naangaika kuandika, lakini haviandikiki. Maana nikaanza kusimama kama sasa mimi hapa nataka niboreshe uhusiano na serikali. Nikaona kuna vingi vya kusema. Nikasema sasa nataka niboreshe ushirikiano huu na bunge. Nikaona kuna mengi kwenye serikali. Kuna sema jamani kama serikali hivyo mmeanza kutambua, tunaona mazingira yanazidi kuwawezesha, lakini tutaendeleaje kuhakikisha kila kinachofanywa na Azaki pia kinatiki na kinaongelewa kwa sauti kubwa sana katika mipango mbalimbali ya maendeleo. Nikarudi nikakaa upande mwingine kwa bunge, nikasema uwezeshaji, sera, policy. Sasa hivyo lini mimi nilishiriki kutengeneza policy gani mara ya mwisho? Hivyo sera ile inaniwakilisha vipi? Nikaongelea sijui hili, nikatoka nikarudi kwa upande mwingine kuangalia kati yetu na ya Azaki na Azaki nyingine. Nikasema Azaki zipo zina majina mengi na magumu kweli kweli, na wanafanya vitu vingi na muhimu kweli kweli. Hapa tunafanyaje ili angalau tufike siku labda tuanze kuwa tuna mlengo wa pamoja, tunakuwa na ajenda ya pamoja, ili sauti zetu ziwe za nguvu zaidi na zisikike zaidi. Nikarudi nikaangalia sasa kama sisi na wananchi. Nikasema sasa mimi mwananchi, na mimi kama mwananchi nikajikuta sasa nafanya mapping yatoka nilipokuwa mdogo, nilipokuwa naona wazazi wangu wanaenda kushiriki kwenye vikao mbalimbali vya familia, vikao kwenye kata, na mimi mwenyewe nikaanza kushiriki vikao mbalimbali vya maazishi, vikao vya harusi, vikao professional kwenye maeneo ya kazi mbalimbali. Nikajiuliza hivyo nini kipo pale kwenye center? Nikasema lakini pale mimi nadhani ukiangalia kwenye center ilikuwa watu wote tunakaa, wala hata huangalii huyu kavaa shati la kijani au la blue, katokea wapi au wapi, wote tulikuwa tunasema hapa pana tatizo na inabidi litatuliwe. Si ndio jamani? Na matatizo mara nyingi yanamhusu mtu. Hajawahi kutokuwa tatizo likawa linahusu liko hewani. Tatizo yanamhusu mtu. Sasa nikasema tunasema tuboreshe mawashirikiano, lakini tunasema people's development, people's story. Sasa zimeenda wapi hizi story? Kumbe development inafanyika kwa ajili ya nani kama sio kwa ajili ya watu siku zote hizi? Kwa hiyo nikaanza kuweka yale makundi na kuyapangua. Nikasema sasa ni balance tu ndio inayohitajika hapa, kwa sababu kote vikao vyote vile ambavyo nishawahi kukaa mimi huko nyuma kwa kushirikiana na hizi taasisi mbalimbali tutotaja na niseme nini, hizi pillars mbalimbali za maendeleo tutotaja, zote ilikuwa tunasema tunatatuaje matatizo ya wananchi. Si ndio? Zote tumekuwa tukisema hivyo. Sasa imetokea nini mpaka sasa hivi tunaona kwamba sauti za wananchi zinaanza kupungua? Imetokea nini mpaka sasa hivi tunaona kwamba huyu mwananchi hawi kwanza? Sijui mtu gani anakuwa kwanza na sio mwananchi, kwa sababu sisi wote ni wananchi na sisi ndio watu. Si ndio jamani? Nchi hii si yetu na ndio wananchi wenyewe sisi. Sasa huyo people tunayemweka kwanza ni upi? Ni mimi au ni wewe au ni yule? Ni nani huyo? Nadhani hapo nikajikuta kuna umuhimu sana wa kuangalia na kuinterrogate kwenye framework zetu za analysis. Tunapofanya uchambuzi mbalimbali za jinsi ya kutatua matatizo, sauti gani zinakuwa pale kwenye kutambua, kwenye kuchambua, kwenye kupanga, kwenye kutatua, kwenye kufuatilia na kusema sasa na mimi nimeona mabadiliko niliyotaka. Nadhani huko ndo tunakotaka kwenda. Na nimefurahi ratiba imepangwa kutuwezesha hilo. Lakini labda kama mkulisema kwenye ratiba mimi nilivyoliona, kwa sababu na mimi nawakilisha makundi mengi kati yao makundi ambayo tunataka mimi niko kwenye kwenye private sector nimo, dadangu na mimi niko huko. Kwenye wananchi mimi mwananchi. Kwenye asasi ndio nilikokulia, ni mwana harakati. Nikasema inaelekea hapa, nadhani ni waombe wenzangu wana azaki mlioko hapa, tunachotakiwa kufanya, nadhani na tunachotaka kufanya, na tukiongelea hicho Ijumaa, ni kuweka dira thabiti ya kubadilisha mfumo mzima wa maendeleo. Bold vision ya kuchange how development is done. Mtu kwanza. Kama mtu kwanza, we need to change how development is done. It cannot be government first. Haiwezi kuwa bunge first. Haiwezi kuwa civil society first. Kwa hiyo hii inabidi kubadilisha mfumo. hatuwezi kuwa business as usual. Lazima tuwe na bold vision ya kubadilisha how development is done, na hasa tukianzia kwenye mifumo wezeshi iliyopo, sera mbalimbali zilizopo, lakini hasa pia kwenye mfumo wa upatikanaji na vyanzo vya mapato, the aid system. Lakini kikubwa zaidi, turudi tujiulize, hivyo sisi tumekuwa na value ni nini kwa Kiswahili? Thamani. Wow. Tunu labda. Thamani imeogopa. Tunu zipi ndio zimekuwa zikituwezesha sisi hata tukikaa vikao vyetu vya harusi, vya misiba na vya kufanya shughuli mbalimbali tukafanikiwa? Zile kwa nini haziendelezwi tunapokuja kuangalia maendeleo? Hii people first inabebwa na tunu gani? Lakini tunu zetu sisi ambazo tumedhirisi na mkatakao mtumwa, mimi narudi kule kule, ni ushirikiano, umoja, upendo, kuaminiana, si ndio? Na mshikamano, solidarity. Sisi kwetu imekuwa ni tunu kubwa kuliko zote. Sisi kama Waafrika hatuwezi kubadilisha pale. Tunafanya kazi kwa pamoja kwa sababu tayari kuna tatizo, lazima litatuliwe. Kila mmoja analeta chake, analeta mchanga kama tunataka kujenga darasa, analeta maji, analeta mawe, anajenga, si ndio? Tunakwama, tunaenda tunaomba mtusaidie mabati. Kama kuna kama serikalini, tunaenda kwa mbunge, bwana tusaidie kupiga kelele huko, angalau na sisi madarasa yetu yaingizwe kwenye budget na kwenye policies mbalimbali. Hizo ndo tunu ambazo zimetolea. Sasa hizo tunu tuzirudishe basi nyumbani ili kuongeza legitimacy ya sekta yetu. Tunajiuliza maswali mengi sana kwa sababu kumekuwa na maswali mengi sana pia, na tumetoa mianya ya sekta yetu kuulizwa maswali mengi na kuuliziwa maswali mengi, kuwekewa vichocheo vya kuonyesha labda tunachokifanya hakiliwiani na hizo tunu za Mwafrika anapotakiwa kufanya kujiletea maendeleo yake. Na tumekuwa tukiwianishwa pia na matukio mbalimbali ambayo kwa kweli si haki, kwa sababu hatuko hivyo. Sisi ni wananchi, ni wawakilishi wa wananchi, na zile tunu pale ambapo tunasahau kidogo tu kuzifanyia kazi kwa sababu tu tunaamini kabisa ili tuweze kujiletea maendeleo lazima tukatafute na tukaombe kwa nchi za jirani kama kianzio, pale ndo tumepata shida. Sasa natamani tufike mahali kwa muktadha huu wa kujenga vision kubwa na ya development na kubadilisha how development is done kwenye mifumo, kwenye system, kwenye mindset zetu sisi wenyewe. Tuangalie pia jinsi gani tunarudi kuangalia na kuquestion tunachokipata kutoka kwa wanaotusaidia kinaongeza nini. Lakini sisi mpaka tuende kule lazima tuwe tumeshatumia taratibu zetu na tunu tulizonazo na uwezo tulionao na nafasi tulizonazo kujiuliza maswali yanayojitosheleza na kuhakikisha kwamba sisi sio wajiwaji, ila anayefahamu tatizo lake ni yule mwananchi. Kwa sababu mimi nilishindwa kuvaa kiatu na kuwa kwenye nafasi ya kila mmoja kati ya makundi ambayo nimejiuliza wakati toka juzi nilipoambiwa nakuja kuongea hapa. Kwa hiyo tukiweza tu kuchukua nafasi yetu na kuhakikisha kwamba tunajiwekea taratibu na kuendelea kutekeleza shughuli zetu ndani ya utaratibu tuliojiwekea, ambao huo utaratibu una define role ya civil society, ambapo kama sio tu kuwakilisha wananchi, lakini sisi ni daraja kati ya mawazo, mahitaji ya wananchi na miamala na mihimili mingine ya maendeleo. Tujikite pale, na tumekuwa tukijikita hapo, lakini kuna wakati tunatetereka kidogo kwa sababu labda ya vyanzo vya pesa au kwa sababu sisi wenyewe tunyoshiani vidole. Kwa hiyo nimefurahi kwamba kipindi hiki tutakuwa tunaangalia hayo yote. Kwa zaidi nadhani tunapoenda kufanya mijadala yetu ndani ya wiki yote, hata ongezea zaidi kakaangu Anthony pale, tujue kabisa kwamba sisi tuna power kubwa sana ya kuleta mabadiliko nchini. Asasi za kiraia zina power kubwa sana ya kuleta mabadiliko kwa sababu sisi tunaishi na mwananchi na tunaongea sauti ya mwananchi. Kwa sababu tumesema mwananchi sasa ambaye anaweza kukaa karibu na mwananchi kuliko sisi ni nani? Sisi wenyewe wananchi, kwa hiyo tunakaa karibu na wananchi. lakini kila mmoja ni mwananchi na anakaa karibu na mwananchi, to exercise your power. tumekuwa kidogo wagumu ku exercise power. Nadhani dadangu atanisaidia hata ku exercise power kwenye financial transaction na ku benefit from the financial institutions hapa nchini, wakati hela zetu zinafikia kwao, hatujaweza ku exercise hiyo power kwenye negotiation tables. Nadhani inabidi tufike hapo. Lakini hata ku exercise power za kusaidia kubadilisha sheria mbalimbali ambazo zinawabana private sector na zinatubana na sisi kwenye kumobilize resources ndani na nje ya nchi, hatujafika hapo. Lakini pia power tulionayo ya kukaa mezani na serikali tukaomba mabadiliko tunayoyahitaji, tukaomba na tukasema sauti za wananchi ziingie hapa, exercise vya kutosha. Power ya kukaa na bunge na kusema jamani, hatushiriki kamilifu kwa sababu hizi sera mbalimbali hizi na sheria zinazotungwa sio shirikishi, exercise vya kutosha. Power ya kukaa sisi wenyewe kwa wenyewe tukaambiana ukweli kwamba bwana, sikiliza, umepata mamilioni ya pesa juzi, unachokifanya sio, exercise kikamilifu, si ndio? Na kwamba nenda pale na pale na pale unahitajika. Lakini pia power ya kurudi kwa wananchi na kusema kwamba sisi tunakuja kwenu, tunaongea na nyinyi, maendeleo ni ya wananchi na wananchi kwanza, hiyo pia exercise kamilifu. Kwa hiyo mimi challenge yangu ni kuchange how development is done, mfumo mzima wa maendeleo, lakini pia tuangalie jinsi gani tuta exercise power tulionayo. Kama lengo letu ni wasichana, to exercise power ya kuwakilisha wasichana ndani ya nchi. Wako wengi wana matatizo mengi. Kama lengo letu ni wavulana, to exercise hiyo power. Kama lengo letu sisi tunajenga kwenye mifumo na sheria, to exercise hiyo power. Kama lengo letu sisi ni kujenga kwenye kukusanya tu taarifa zilizopo kwenye jamii na kuhakikisha kwamba sauti za jamii zinasikika, basi to exercise your power. Power comes na power ndio itakayotusaidia sisi kubalance na kuleta mashirikiano tunayoyatafuta. Kwa hiyo next time niko najiuliza, kama mtu mwingine angeulizwa kuongea angeongea nini, mimi naamini wote tungeongea hili kwa upande mmoja au mengine. Lakini next time basi tukikaa turudi sasa tuende mbele zaidi, tusiwe tu tunaendelea kuimarisha, tuamini vimeshaimarika tuende kwenye mengine, lakini kuimarisha hiki kitu, kwa sababu matatizo ya wananchi yamejikita kwenye mifumo, inahitaji muda mrefu sana. Kwa hiyo tuweke mbinu za uendelevu za kuhakikisha kwamba tunatatua na tunafungua hiyo mifumo ambayo itaanza kuwa uwezeshi sasa, mifumo kwenye nyanja zote, akiwepo mwananchi kwanza. Mwananchi, Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, Azaki. Naomba nifanye ile kazi niliyotumwa ya kumkaribisha kaka yangu Anthony Mviangi aje aongee na sisi. Karibu kaka Anthony.
Habari ya asubuhi. Nitajaribu kuona Kiswahili changu kama kimerudi au kimepotea. Narudia tena, habari ya asubuhi. Yes. Kwa heshima na taadhima, I'm privileged to stand before you, but let me observe protocols first. Madam President, thank you for your kind words. The Executive Director, Francis, private sector representative from Stanbank. It's really great to see private sector getting into the civil society movement. Private sector, I believe also, or civil society, yes, and Mzee Uto. I am very much honored and privileged to stand before you. Ni kijana wa Kitanzania, nina heshima na taadhima kwa Watanzania wenzangu. Wazee mlioko kwenye audience, shikamoni. Vijana wenzangu, habari ya asubuhi tena. Nashukuru sana kusimama mbele yenu. Nasubiri slides, lakini nadhani kazi yangu leo it's to set the tone for the week. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy job, but I'll try to do my very best to set the tone for the week, to set the tone for what this whole week will be about. As Francis alluded to, I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm leading an organization. Can I get the slides? Clicker? Thank you. I'm leading an organization. You can see the logo. It's called Partnership for African and Social Governance Research. It's a Pan-African organization which is operating in over 26 countries in the continent. And we basically focus more on public policy and governance issues. And public policy is broad. Civil societies is one of our anchor partners that we have in the work that we do. So today I'm just going to try to put together some questions. I would prefer to ask questions. I won't answer all of them. I'll try to provide a little bit of context here and there, but at the same time I'll leave you with a lot of questions. I like to provoke thinking. I like to provoke sio ule uchokozi. I hope serikali haitakuja kutuvamia hapa. Uchokozi wa mawazo. People, we have to think. Na kama as a country we need to think. Last week I was in Mauritius and I attended one of the powerful speech by the Minister of Education from Uganda, and she said this: Africa needs to think. We cannot delegate our thinking to other people. So I believe this conversation this whole week is the beginning of that journey. Reflection is part of thinking, and that's why we are thinking. So today I want to talk to you about the uncivil society, and particularly the third sector. Kuna serikali, private sector, na azaki, sindio? Non-state actors, the third sector in development. Why are we here? Why are we convening in Arusha this whole week? To just enjoy per diems and sightsee Arusha and have good time? Okay, perhaps yes, it comes with fringe benefits, right? But I think there's more than that. So I just want to take you through some reflections before I dive into the conversation. And some reflections, because my organization, as I said, it works in different countries in the continent. I just want to lay out what are the bigger issues, what are the policy challenges that the countries in the continent are grappling with. The idea here is to frame the conversation that it's not only in Tanzania, but this is happening in many other countries as well. So this conversation is timely. And we have seen in some countries, citizens have taken matters to the street. In Sierra Leone, in Sri Lanka, we saw they toppled the government because citizens are not happy. So it's indeed, development has to be about people. Without people, there's no development. So a little bit of reflections. Where are we now as a civil society? What are the things that can guarantee our sustainability? I'm just trying to make sure you're able, before I start poking the bear, at least lay the ground of where you are. There are so many things. There are so many things that requires all of us collectively to work together. There are complementarities. Most often you see, and I'll talk about this, and there are conversation in the donor space now ongoing about how do we come together, how do we coalesce ourselves into a more powerful movement as opposed to being individual and self-centered. How do we complement each other? Very important. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the CSO ecosystem and the complementarities that what do you do, the things that you can do. Of course, the civic space is where you want to be able to engage, and most of you are working, as President said, you're working with people. You have people's voices. It's very true. You have voices, you understand the issues that people are facing, the challenges, the communities that are facing, and you carry them with you in your messaging. Very important. But also, foreign policy. As a country, how are we organized? Because development is not only about what we see internally, but collectively, Tanzania has signed different charters, legal statutes, the United Nations. How does this movement coalesce to becoming a bigger movement that can actually also speak to our foreign policy as a country? Very important. And legal and regulatory policies. I know this is a very contentious, especially in our country. It's part of growth, I suppose. I think we were teasing a bit, but now this is an area for dialogue. This is an area for engagements. And I'll talk a little bit about what are the experiences in other countries and what can we do as a country to move the ball forward. All right, so in between you have a lot of things. Intervention, scalability, we'll talk about when you're doing interventions, evidence-informed policy making, and how can you scale it up? What works, what is not working? Relevance, legitimacy, and accountability. There's a lot of suspicion and mistrust between civil society and governments. And in some cases, and I'll talk about its integrity. Yesterday I was talking to Francis and we were talking about decolonization. And there's this big buzzwords about decolonizing, and every time we think of decolonizing, we think of black and white. But we don't think about decolonizing our own selves before we think about decolonizing, because we can better decolonize things when we are able to decolonize ourselves, mentally and institutionally, in the way we do things. But I'll talk about that along the way. And then how are we organized? You know, in terms of our structures, in terms of our systems that we have in place. Very important for successful movement as a civil society as we think about people-centered development. Okay? And finally, organic, interest and urgency. Why are you here? That's why I asked in the beginning. Why are you in Arusha? What are you doing here? Are you here for your own interests, or are you here for a broader community that you are representing? And I want you to reflect as you continue to engage the whole week. It's very important to reflect. Yes, you are networking. Yes, you are meeting people. But why are you here? What is it that you carry by the end of the week back to where you came from? Very important. All right, so let's come to the real issues in Africa. I used to teach, so I'm just getting into the mode of being in a class. So pardon me if I become too much of a lecturer. It comes naturally. So what are the issues? This is statistics survey that was done by Afrobarometer. And Afrobarometer, for those who know, it surveys citizens, the perceptions about different governance and leadership issues that are happening in the continent. And this is what Africans are saying about priorities, pressing issues in the community. Number one being unemployment. Of course, 1.4 billion people in Africa, 70% of those are young people under the age of 30. 65% are young people under the age of 25. 40% are young people without employment. Do the math. There's no change that we see in the continent that is not being propelled by young people. Right now, politicians cannot get votes if young people don't vote. It's very true. That's what has happened in Kenya recently. Young people didn't vote. The turnout was very low. And if you ask them, and I had a chance to talk to them, they ask, I don't see the importance. Why do I have to go and vote? For what? I see the same faces, the same names, the same elite structure that seem to perpetuate. They don't seem to help me. I'm still struggling. I work to find and justify means, find livelihood. So we need to think about that. Unemployment is very critical, not only in Tanzania, in the continent. It's a pressing, it's a time-ticking bomb. Young people without jobs. We have a project at Pasca that we are looking into young people's voices, resilience and adaptability post-COVID, where we are doing in 7 countries, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Senegal, Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. And in all these countries I've been to, speaking to ministers, speaking to young people, unemployment and challenges that young people are facing seems to be the top in the list. Health, education, infrastructure, water, poverty, all of these, I don't want to go one by one, but I want to emphasize the last one. People are saying democracy, inequality, and political rights. It doesn't seem to be, but it's very important. civic space, and we'll talk about that. But we understand our economies, we understand the structure of our countries. You know, you can't talk of democracy if you're hungry. You need to feed your tummy first, then you can think about freedom. But anyway, that's a different conversation in a different space. But what I want to, the essence of this slide is just to give you a picture of what are the issues in the continent. What is it that is happening around the continent? And so much so that Tanzania does not feel we are unique in our settings. We are not. These are issues that are happening across the continent, and they're happening in our countries. The question now is, what can civil societies do about it? And I think that's the essence of why we're here in the first place. Okay. What about, let me now shift gear a bit and give you a sense of what are the issues that are happening in East Africa, because we are in East Africa. And by and large, East Africa is doing pretty well in that space. So just a footprint of what is happening where. In Kenya, for example, Kenyan men joined the battle to end FGMC. In 2019-2020, I was contracted by Porticus Africa to do an evaluation, Amref Africa, sorry, to do an evaluation on female genital mutilation. They had a project called Alternative Rite of Passage, and in Kenya they wanted to understand to what extent the alternative rite of passage has worked. So we did with Maasai community in Kajiado, the northern side in Tanzania. What we found was quite revealing. In that report, actually, the Kenyan Anti-FGMC board used it, the government of Kenya, was quite revealing in terms of what the citizens are saying about FGMC. My point I'm trying to drive home here is civil societies have a role to play. And working with communities, you can discover so many issues. Tanzania, you attack on activists, journalists, we have seen movement on social media, conscription of rights, we've seen them. And the question is, as the president put it, how do we engage in co-creation of these laws? Because laws are not meant to serve particular individuals. Laws are meant to serve us all as a collective body, as a nation. Laws are not targeted to individuals. Laws are supposed to be targeted to help the country. The question is how engaging the process of developing, building, and creating these laws is. Where are your voices? We don't want to see laws that seem to be skewed toward a certain direction. And I think from where we are and where the world is right now, it's very important. So my point on this slide is just to show you there's a lot you can do, a lot of good that you can do that can bring tremendous change in our communities. This is just an example. How can we hold governments to account? And because we are the third sector, how can we, I am still in that space as well, how can we hold governments to account? But the how is also goes hand in hand with the framing. There's the messaging and the how and the engagement, and then also the culture of debating. I think that I like that's why schools, they have debating programs. I think we need to encourage those. We need to encourage debating because they enhance our ability to not only to speak in front of the public, but to engage and think creatively based on issues and not personalities. Okay? Freedom of speech. This is, I know it's a topical issue. It's not only in Tanzania, it's across the board. How do we allow our citizens to engage and speak and challenge where they see things are not doing okay? And how do we take that power? Because at the end of the day, people have the power. The government, the leaders draw powers from the people. I have a friend of mine in Nairobi, probably some of you know, on the road, he was being interviewed, he said, on the road, when the police with their move, he said, why do I move? I'm the one who is paying taxes in the first place. Why should I move? You are supposed to save me. Well, it's a different conversation. But if you think about it, the irony is true. Why should you let the leaders pass? At the end of the day, the car they are driving is your tax. The fuel they are using is your tax. Why can't they just follow? Because they are there to save you. If at all leaders claim to save people, but of course there are issues to do with security and whatnot. So was just a side note. So don't take it seriously, please. Okay, so why CSOs in Tanzania? I've alluded a bit about this. Maybe I'll go quickly. So what are the thumbs up? What are the things that you have done well? And I think you should continue to do more. What are the things that I think if more momentum is galvanized, so much change and impact can be felt all the way to the grassroots levels. So you have proven track in service delivery. You have done quite well. You have done quite well, and I really, use this week to reflect and congratulate yourself in your own small ways. Sometimes we are too ambitious wanting to move this much. But even when you move one needle, we have made a change. And I think you should commend yourself for all the good work that you have been doing. Emergency responses we have seen during COVID-19. We've seen how vulnerable, most vulnerable in the communities have suffered. We have seen now the rising cost of living in Africa, you know, with exogenous shock, what I call the triple C. I'll talk about them, of what is happening in other parts of the world which have spillover effect in our economies. They affect us, the most vulnerable, but civil society have always held their hands together to support those who are most vulnerable in the society. I think that for me, as part of that bigger movement, is a thumb up as well. You are the human rights defender. Those who don't have voice, those who are voiceless, you have spoken for them. Those who are left, they're marginalized, they're disenfranchised, they're all part and parcel now because of your good work. This is very important. It's very important for the work that you do, but it's very important to continue to put more effort to make sure that human rights also is protected. You have been part and parcel of policy implementation, of course, with some caveats in terms of the challenges you've been facing, in terms of sometimes navigating. But you've done a good job in terms of shaping conversations. Kutumbua majipu. You have done very well. Sometimes majipu yakitumbua usaa, ukitoka unakurukia usoni. It backfires, but umetumbua regardless. Right? See, it's no longer jipu, it's no longer a boiler, it's kidonda sasa, kinakauka. Of course, it has its cost. It's part of being a society. You know, development, again, it's a process. And within that process, there are quite a number of issues. And you have been critics of government, and I'll talk about this criticism with the government, and how best can we engage with the government so we become all collectively as agents of change in shaping and helping governments and removing that mistrust and suspicion that exists between government and civil societies, particularly in Tanzania. Now, first I give you the good stuff, and then where are you still struggling? Thumb down. And this for me is an area for reflection this week. One, urban-centric. No, there's if you do statistics of where these CSOs are located, they are located where players are. Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Kilimanjaro, Zanzibar. How many are deeply, majority of Tanzanians, I think statistics show 65% are still in rural areas. We are a country of what, almost 60 million people. That's about 36 million people are living in rural areas. And there's so much that's happening. A couple of years ago, I attended a conference in Rome about agricultural transformation in rural Africa. And there's now a concept we call, in the past they used to call missing middle. There's no more missing middle. It's called hidden middle. There's so much that is happening under our nose that we don't pay attention to. Things are organically changing under our nose. They're hidden from policy space. They're hidden from everywhere where things are happening. But things are happening. Okay? So the challenge that I pose to you, if you claim you save wananchi, If you claim you are for the people, go down there and live with them. You can't claim you are mbunge wa wananchi and always you're in Dar es Salaam. What are you doing in Dar es Salaam? We tend to poke and point a finger to wabunge, right? I'm pointing a finger at you. You can't claim to be a civil society that's serving communities while you're based in Dar es Salaam in high offices. Your core job is to serve the people, to understand their agony, to help them. So 80%, 70% of your time should be on the ground. Otherwise, you'll just be forging and thinking, oh, maybe they think this is the problem. There's a joke. One time researchers, a very good friend of mine said it, and I'm going to say it here. A community, let's say where we have malaria, Dar es Salaam, because of the tropical, right? So researchers felt this community is struggling with malaria. Lakini, the problem was mapanya, mapanya buku ya rodents, wanakula, they are eating mazao. So the community was struggling with rodents. But researchers from outside, they thought the problem is malaria. These people, that place must have so much malaria. So they organized themselves, let's go and do study on malaria in that particular village. But the pressing issue that the community was facing was not malaria. They knew they had their own indigenous ways to contain malaria. Their problem was rodents, because they were eating their harvests. So they went to see Mwananchi, they called the usual participatory way. You know, the chair of the Kijiji said, oh, here is our proposal. Help us solve our rodents, and we will help you solve your malaria problem. Your malaria problem. Help us solve the rodent issue that we are facing. We will help you solve it. Because for them, malaria was not an issue. For them, the issue was rodents. So there was mismatch. What you think Mwananchi wants is not necessarily what they truly want, unless you go down there, sit down, talk to them, understand what they need. Formulate policy, formulate plans, engagements from the bottom up. That is the challenge to you. Elitist. There has been claims that civil society are elitist, a certain type of people. We need to think differently. It's not a group of the eco-minds coming together. It's a group that is meant to serve a greater good. And its composition then should be representative. Boldness to change the way you do things. The world is moving. I'll talk about some of these, and I had a chance to review the program. I see there are some very interesting activities that are going to be presented in the course of the week. But it's very important to change. Sasa sisi wa Tanzania watu tunasema Mwalimu wa Nyerere fikira za mwenyekiti zidumu. But dunia imemove. Fikira za mwenyekiti bado zinaheshimika, lakini je, kweli zidumu? Sio kwamba tunadharau change. We have to adapt. So boldness to change is key. And how can you change if you're not open? If you're closed-minded, you cannot change. If you're not open to criticism, you cannot change. If you don't have time to reflect, you cannot change. So I implore you to embrace that culture of open-mindedness, engagement, constructive engagement, so you can change. And if you change, you are able to gravitate development all the way down to the people, and you will carry the people with you to where they're supposed to go. Sustainability. Of course, funding, like we've said, you pata mamilioni to share. I have my own, yes, funding is important, we need to have partners, but I have a slide on that, and I'm going to pose questions on that, so let me not preempt it. Constricting civil space, yes, this is also a challenge, particularly for the government. You guys all of us, we have to be careful what you say, how you say. The civic space is a bit restricted. But then, what do we do? Even for the space that we have. Can we keep complaining the government? Yes, the government can in its own ways. But what is government? Government is not a machine from heaven. Government is people we grew up with. We went to school together. We play with them. What shaped them? Some of them you went to school together, to church, mosque, every day. But what changed? These are the things that we need. And since we are dealing with communities, we are dealing with people, there's a great opportunity to actually address some of these issues. Sometimes, some of them at family level, at household level, at community level, and NGOs have a space to play there. Unfavorable policy environment, I've talked about this. Let me talk self-interest, not people-centric. You set up a CSO, very bold vision and mission, big English, lots of vocabulary. You go to donors, big tie. Yes, we can do this. Us, we are this and that. Yeah, this is our monitoring and our evaluation. You know, our financial systems, we have good governance in place. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, like hit with the bank account, my friend. Well, let's go to Zanzibar meetings. Arusha. Now we have to report. Go to the village. Get that one mwananchi atupe maoni. Craft report. Self-interest. Are we people-centered? Now we are saying mwananchi kwanza. Are we truly mwananchi kwanza? Sasa usinijibu. Na usiniulize swali na kuatia. Are you truly mwananchi kwanza? Ukienda back to the hotel, stand in front of the mirror and ask yourself, am I truly mwananchi kwanza? Or am I following rhetorics on Twitter, on social media, and because Madam President said, mwananchi kwanza, Tajiriundi said, mwananchi kwanza. But are you? Integrity. Very key. For development partners in the room, integrity is everything in the civil society movement. Because you're entrusted with resources to help bring change. Now, if those resources are not properly managed, you're in trouble. Integrity is key. And there's a lot of work to be done in that space. Okay. Now, I've poked you enough. Let me not continue. Otherwise, you'll not let me leave this. Let's go now to the civil society, the state, and the society. And I want to pose, are you guys waving or drowning? You know, waving or drowning, for those who are following British comedy and music, waving or drowning, you know, sometimes you see someone in the ocean, yeah? They are swimming, yeah? When they are swimming like that, if they are dying, you can't tell. They might be waving for help, but at the same time, they might be doing there. So which part are you on? Are you swimming, or are you waving for help? Are you drowning? You know, when you swim, for those who are swimmers, you know, unapiga mbizi, unaenda hivi, your hand is like that. Sasa mimi nikiwa mbali naona, is that guy saying hello, but he's dying? So which part are you? Are you waving or are you drowning? And I want to unpack a few questions here that I would challenge you to think throughout the week. Do people have a say? We have talked about this a bit. See those rails? You want to construct rail, and that's what happened. Do people have a say? When you say maendeleo ya watu na maendeleo ya, whose priorities? To what extent your work is informed by views and opinions and perception of the people by the people? Au ndo tunakaa Arusha, tunakaa Zanzibar, tunacraft, we think, wananchi, Tanzania, nadhani wanahitaji hiki. And we are very good at getting language that the donor will be happy. Right. But to what extent have we really, truly gone down to that particular community, do focus group discussions, do ethnographic surveys to assimilate, to understand, so you're able to say, this is what Mwananchi wants, and this is what we support. So we need to think about bottom-up approaches. Research and evidence is key, and I'll talk about our experience in the continent, the work that we are doing, and the impact that it brings in the policy making. So participatory action research is important, but what is important is co-creation and co-production. Now, co-creation has several levels. One, you and the Mwananchi, but as I said, complementarities. You cannot do it alone. CSOs should not look at each other as competitors. They should look at each other as complementaries. You complement each other. You support each other. The question is, have you done scoping studies, mapping of who is who where, and maybe this is where the federation should come in. Because you have the members, who is doing what. Right now, last year I had a conversation with donors, and I share this example all the time, who are keen to see how they bring together think tank of think tanks, starting off with East Africa. And for the very simple reason, each CSO produces evidence. They all go to the government. Huyu anaingia, imagine I'm the minister. You set appointment, unaingia. Madam President naye anaingia. Wewe ukitoka anaingia na evidence yake. Huyu anaingia na evidence yake. Huyu anaingia na evidence yake. Huyu anaingia na evidence yake. It creates confusion. Policymakers are confused. Can CSOs in Tanzania have a cohesive way of how they engage? Very important. Yes, you want to raise money, yes, but think of a way, a win-win way in which CSOs can galvanize effort, so you avoid duplication of effort. If Twaweza is already doing evidence generation, why can't you complement Twaweza's effort, use that evidence to inform other? If ANSAF is doing, but sometimes we all want to do the same things. And the space is very crowded, but the resources that are available, the envelope is very small. And we don't tend to achieve what we want to achieve. So are we waving or are we drowning here? I want you to think this week as you engage for this CSO week. Is service delivery a mirage in Tanzania? Is it an optic illusion that we read on CCM manifesto, political parties manifesto, government pronouncements? Or is it real that we feel it? The government cannot do everything. No government in the world has ever done everything, sorry. And that's why you have actors who come in to complement where the government can't, for several reasons. So government will do what it needs to be done, but it cannot do everything. So the question I'm posing to you, is service delivery in Tanzania a mirage, an illusion? Government struggle? There needs to be complementary efforts. Are there any? I talked about complementarities. What are the sectoral interventions that are being done? Again, I challenge Madam President and Francis, mapping of who is who, where, and what are they doing to avoid duplication of effort and maximize the return on investment. Collaboration and minimize duplication of effort. I've said this, very important. As you leave here this week, make sure you have talked to partners and configured a way of working together. Very important. Because if you don't, you have wasted your week sitting. You need to be able to network and partner. Public-private partnership. That's why I mentioned, I'm pleased to see a financial sector getting into the civil society. Quite bold. So, good job. We need to seek more of these private, public partnerships. Very important. And where is the space for CSO? I was referring to child protection and anti-FGMC. These are some of the work that recently we just concluded some work on child protection in Tanzania. Corporal punishment. And I know the law says, unajua mtoto wa Kitanzania ni mtoto wa jamii. Wengine tulikuwa tunakuwa baba akiongea you cannot raise your voice. Unatafuta ukisikia anakuja huku unatafuta mlango wa kutokea. But the world has changed. These are some of the social areas that we might need to think carefully as civil society. But of course, as Tanzania, tunatunu values. We have our own values. What if we are thinking of defining development? What goes into the definition of development? How do we define Tanzanian development? Not UNDP, not UN development, not World Bank development. Tanzanian development. What is development to you? It starts there. Can CSO foster democracy and good governance in Tanzania? I think, can it be yes or no or somewhere in the middle? Is it yes or no? Somewhere in the middle. Okay, that says a lot. Somewhere in the middle it could be, yes. You're a justice defender. You defend haki za wananchi. Especially, as I said, those who are marginalized, those who are voiceless, you are the justice defender. You are in the democratic space. You spark conversation. You spark difficult engagements. You make sometimes government officials lose their sleeps because of you. Checks and balances. You question things. You ask the right questions, but you need to ask more and learn the art of how to ask without being confrontational. Because the challenge we see is if you ask and you're confrontational, their egos they're flared up, things get in the way, and it becomes problematic. Citizen participation, we are doing a lot of that. And finally, you're amplifying citizen voices. But are you doing enough on amplifying citizen voices, or you need to do more? This week is a week to reflect as you visit and go and see communities and explore ways in which voices of the people can be amplified. Now, can Tanzanian government be held accountable? I want one hand to say yes. Anyone? Yes, ultimately, yes. Can it be held accountable? Is it held accountable? Now I'm confused. So it can be held accountable, but it's not held accountable. So what are you doing? Okay. It was meant to be tricky. Knowledge transfer is key. We want to engage government. We have seen in the continent now, there's a movement, and I'll share this. Having worked with these multinational organizations, government have enacted data on, law on data, right? For good reason, because of helicopter research, data being parachuted out of the countries to protect and preserve what belongs to the country, understandably clear. But what has worked, I remember when I was working, when we were producing a report for the United Nations a couple of years back, one appeal that I realized it works is to use government data. Recently, during COVID, we did a study for the EAC to look at the macroeconomic policy convergence on what are the challenges in the region. So a friend of mine took data from IMF, World Bank, and did some projection. Then we convened central bank people, Minister of Finance. They rejected. They said, no, that's not the reality in our countries. Like Malema, in our countries. This is not it. So I was, okay, if this is not it, what is it then? So we'll give you our data. So we had to work with the data to produce the report, which they resoundingly accepted. What I'm trying to say here, we need to advocate for more space of engagement with the governments. As I said, government cannot do everything. In developed world, data should be subject to public scrutiny. It's just no-brainer. But in our countries, and this is not only in Tanzania, it's in many countries, public data is not subject to scrutiny. It should be, because those data are not manna from heaven. They are from the people, for the people, by the people. And they are funded by the citizens, taxpayers' money. So CSO has a space to engage and ask and demand. But the how you do that matters. Because as I said, government people, they are not machines, they are not robots. These are people we live with, we work with, we talk to, we play golf, we watch soccer together. They are Simba and Yanga. They are people, they are not uniquely structured than us. So the how matters. And I'm encouraging you, and I'm imploring you, and I'm challenging you at the same time. Think of the how. Very important. How do you get buy-in? How do you get your voice into the table? How do you bypass the suspicion and mistrust? Advocacy is key. Very important. And you're doing it. Of course, these days, so there's a slight difference between advocacy and lobbying. Advocacy is creation of awareness. Lobbying is to go into the pocket and say, make this happen. I hope you're not in that space. You're still in the advocacy space. You're creating awareness. But sometimes, if the bunges hawaelewi, when I create awareness, they seem to be dozing off during the... You just go to Dodoma, nice place, or you take them to Zanzibar. There are 4 different ways of doing these things. But advocacy is key. That's the message I want to say. Reflect on your blind spots in the government. And again, I'm saying, how do we engage? Of course, this is a structural issue in many of our countries. In the way our cultures are organized, our society we are organized, the mindset, paradigm shift in the mindset is needed. But it's something that is not going to happen just like that. It's gradual. It's a process. CSO has a role to play in that process. And that also speaks to the last point of constructive criticism. You have been conscripted of your rights, because sometimes criticisms, they come off as not constructive. Now, the reflection this week is, how do we become constructive engagers? How do we become constructive in understanding the other side of the table and seeing how we find a middle ground? As I said, and I'm repeating myself again, the other side of the table, the other isle of the ocean, is not robots, it's people. How do we appeal? How do we get them to come and understand? Because before they got on that side, they were on this side like us. Suddenly when they go on the other side, so what's wrong? The system, we need to sit down and think and engage. Very important. Okay, crisis. So what crisis are you in? If I may ask. Are we in crisis? Are we in crisis? Eh? Watu na maendeleo, si ndio? Are we in crisis? You're not sure? Are we in crisis? Eh? We are not. Okay. So why are you here? Oh, so but you are doing crisis management after you have had a crisis, right? So what is this crisis you're facing? This week you need to reflect. Crisis, and what crisis? Now, What is the place of CSO in evidence-informed policy making? So that's crisis number one you are in, that you didn't want to acknowledge. What is your ability to generate evidence, credible evidence? And how much of your work has evidence generation capacity embedded in it? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the manpower? Because for you to engage the things that I said earlier on, you need to be able to speak credibly. You need to be able to convince and sway the other side to see your point. You can't just go there with empty words and big vocabulary. You need to have facts and evidence. If we don't, can we inform the evidence that is generated? What is being generated? How is it generated? Do we interrogate such evidence? Policy making now, most donors, partners who support, they look into results. Right. Evidence. To what extent what you're doing will amount to this and will change that. When you go to speak for advocacy, for lobbying, are you prepared enough? Or you just go there with big Kiswahili, na misamiati mingi, content 0.1%. 99% is, I'm sorry, hakuna kitu bana. Wakenya nasema unaniuzia chai tu. Acha kuniuzia chai bana. Hebu ongea substance nikusikie. Do we have that substance? Now when we go there, do we have, as I said earlier on, complementary, do we have coalitions? Speak under one cohesive voice as one umbrella representing particular issues that are pressing to the country. Data governance, very key. Where is your space in that space? Where is your space in that space? How do you engage? How do you get government to listen? Very important. And right now, there's a whole lot of discussions across the continent on data governance ecosystems and how do we make them. And the idea there is to generate evidence and how do we share evidence to bring about change in our communities. Now, I'm going to come home where my institution focuses more a bit. And we focus more on public policy and governance issues in the continent. Public policy is very broad, right? Social policy, health, education, you name it, environment. Now I want to take you through the process of how we work as an organization. And I hope this can sort of inspire you in one way or the other. So first, and the question there is, how do you position yourself for public policy discourse? You want it to be listened, but people will listen to you if you have substance to share. You have evidence to share. You can't claim to be listened and you have nothing to share. So you have to galvanize and organize yourselves. We need to be able to galvanize and organize ourselves to be listened to be part of the conversation. Number one, in our organization, we generate evidence. And I'll talk about our flagship approach we call utafiti sera. It's coined in Kiswahili. It's very important to generate evidence. If you don't have evidence, no data, no right what? No data, no? Now nasema no evidence, shut up. Don't come to me kama una evidence. If I'm a police, I'll tell you the same. No evidence, please shut up. Save me the energy of listening to you. It's not nice to be told like that, right? Is it? It's painful, especially with our big egos. Create police champions. Identify police champions. Who are these police champions that you can work with? Even in the government, you have the extreme conservative, but there are those who are Identify people who will align with you, who will listen to you, who can actually go in and speak for you. These days they say in corporate world, if you don't have people who can speak for you in the boardroom, so you need to find someone who can speak for you in the boardroom, right? Because somehow, somewhere down the line, you need to have someone who can speak for you. So identify police champions, people you can work with, within yourselves, within CSOs, but even vertically, up, players, private sector, who can listen to you. Even within the government, who can listen to you. Synthesis and packaging and dissemination is very key. Sometimes we have evidence and we are terrible at packaging that evidence. Terrible. You need to know your audience. I hope I'm doing a good job so far. I hope I'm not I'm not terrible. You need to really know your audience. Who are you talking to? Who do you want to talk to? How do you talk to them? The same slide we presented to the donor, you go to the government with the same slide. It doesn't work like that. You have to contextualize things. So synthesis and packaging and dissemination of information is extremely important. Unataka kwenda kwa mwananchi alafu unataka kwenda na Kiingereza mingi. Kwanza mwananchi atasema, "Wewe, you are wasting my time. Wacha nikalime bana." Si ndio? You have to be creative, and the only way you can do that is if you understand, if you are there with them. But ukitoka mjini, you are never there. You'll go with brochures, unaitwa nini? Napeleka vipeperushi. Oh, sijui ina Kiswahili mingi, mwananchi, what is this? Then you lose. Policy formulation. Get in that space. Get in that space of policy formulation. Push. But the only way, and that's why they have, okay, we have serikali vivuli. I'm not sure if serikali vivuli, shadow governments in the parliament, do they really work? Yeah? I'm not sure. I hear debates in Kenya, shadow governments, and they're very serious. They have facts. They have facts, and sometimes they put ministers on the spot with facts. Nothing personal. Strictly data-driven. The policy makes sense. We've done this study. It doesn't seem to work. But how you say it matters. It's not that they won't listen. They will listen. How you do it matters. Implementation. How do we implement what is agreed? Again, I hear the slogan here is people-centered development. And finally, movement. How do we coalesce ourselves? How do we bring the different players and partners that we can work together? In Kenya, we did a study. Have you ever heard of a concept called sextortion? Sextortion. Sextortion, we did a study in slums in Nairobi showing young girls who exchange sex for water. Sextortion. And that evidence was featured by BBC because we were able to show under what conditions these young girls in slums are suffering to the extent it's dehumanizing to sell your body just to get water. Basic necessity. So do we need to create movements to address some of these challenges? And know who is doing what, where, when. That way we are informed. You are claiming to asking and wanting a voice, but that voice is voiceless if you're not informed. So this is the Utafiti Sera. Utafiti Sera is a flagship program we are doing across many countries in the way we do research and evidence generation. We basically focus on demand-driven research. In academia, having worked in academia before, researchers, they tend to sit in a ivory tower. I'm a professor of XYZ. I think this is the problem. This is the hypothesis I want to test. They do a very fancy model and whatnot, and they go to Mwananchi and say, what is this? Nonsense. Rubbish. No one is listening. Well, go publish and get your accolades as a professor or whatever. But it doesn't speak to the realities because of disconnect. Now, our way of doing research is bottom up. We identify an issue, we coalesce around players in different sectors, what we call communities of practice or houses, in different sectors in urbanization. We have projects across many countries on African cities, on agriculture, on water, on health. Now we have COVID vaccines in multiple countries. But the idea there is the research and the evidence we generate is owned by the people, by the stakeholders within that space. To the extent our work has found its way into policy making directly, without a fuss. We convene ministers, we talk to them, they listen because they were part and parcel of that evidence generation process. Directly or indirectly. Very important. So it's a lesson here. As we think, and I push you to think about evidence generation, perhaps you might want to learn more about our Utafiti Sera, and feel free to visit our website. You read a lot more of what we do there. Now I see people are almost sleeping. So let's go, let's come back to the world. Where are we now and where the future is? The present and the future of CSOs. And I've identified about 5 areas that I want to talk about. The first one is the 4th Industrial Revolution. 4th Industrial Revolution. We are talking about Africa Industrialization Agenda, Agenda 2063. At the core, the pinnacle of 4th Industrial Revolution is digital transformation. We see a lot of, now don't misquote me, tweeting a lot is not digital transformation. Writing a lot of social media is not digital transformation. It can be part and parcel of digital transformation. But what I'm trying to bring to the fore here is how prepared are we to support this movement, to support our countries in the 4th Industrial Revolution. We have a role to play at the 3rd sector. We are working with people, with young people. What platforms are we creating for digital transformation? If you go to Rwanda right now, and I'll give what Kagame is doing in Rwanda, they are heavily investing in digital transformation, ICT hubs. They have invited great universities to be hosted in Kigali. Carnegie is there. All the top Ivy League universities, they are opening centers in Kigali. And most parents in the region, they send their kids to Kigali or Mauritius for IT-related degrees. They are preparing a massive young people, a population of young people who are very keen, who are savvy and digitally equipped to innovate, to think and act. Now, challenge for CSOs in Tanzania. Where are you in that space? Because 4th Industrial Revolution is here. So don't wait until upitwe na upepo. Upepo umefika. Unafanya nini? How you go always to health, water. I've been doing that 20 years. 4th Industrial Revolution inakuja. Health and water, they are still. How do we think differently? Data and governance systems are very key, and I've talked about them. The second issue I want to talk about, which is the present and is also the future, is the youth bulge. I said before, Africa now is approximately 1.4 billion people. 70% of 1.4 billion people are young people. It's a time-ticking bomb. Right now, you compete for a public office. Statistically speaking, a huge chunk who will vote for you are young people. The old people are phasing out. I don't mean to say they should go. I'm saying it's a fact. Wazee naomba mnisamehe. Na ile nadharia ya kwamba kijana ni taifa la kesho, I'm sorry, it's flawed. It's It's horrible. Wale walikuwa wanasema kijana ni taifa wa kesho. Mzee Uto, tafadhali. Naomba tuheshimiane. Kijana ni taifa la leo. We live today. We don't live for tomorrow. We live today. Nataka vijana mlioko mndani mpige vigelegele. We live for today. Politicians, leaders, listen. We need to create spaces for young people. Very important, and I keep saying this across all the countries that I've gone to. We cannot change governments unless we have young people in the power and policy making decisions, boardrooms. We have Minister of Youth. Who is the minister? How old is he or she? Is it a young person? Define young. Eh? Definition in UN is up to 34. If he's above 34, he's not young. Or then he's not young. We need to be able to trust young people to build their capacity. You know, sometimes, and I'm going to say this, when I was being recruited, I'm a young man by all counts. And you go to the board, you meet old people. Yeah? And then I remember one time I was being introduced. They say, you are giving this young man an organization. Are you sure? Are you sure? But I've proven that I'm what it takes. And there are many like me in the audience. What we need is to give them the chance. We won't know if these young people are capable. If we keep blaming them and say, young people this, young people are lazy, give them the chance. Let them fault, and then you have evidence to say about them. Civil societies, you have a role to play. Building confidence of young people. It's real. And it's the future. This is the problem the continent is grappling with as we speak. And it will be here for the next decades to come. This is very important. So I implore you this week, in all your discussions, think about where is the space for young people. Allow me to talk briefly on the CCC challenges. By CCC, I mean COVID, conflict, and climate change. COVID, conflicts, and climate. Tanzania, we are very lucky. Conflict is not, well, we have our own mental conflicts. It's not that we are free of conflicts. We do have conflicts, but we don't take bundukis and what and go to the street and kill each other. So we have our own mental conflicts, which with mental health and support, we find a way to navigate and survive. But I want to focus more on COVID and climate change. Climate change is real. Yesterday I was talking to someone, food security issues. Right now we just got secured funding from one of our donors on food systems. What are the challenges? COVID has brought to the fore challenges on food systems. How do we think differently? Especially for the people, those who are marginalized, those who are voiceless, those who are in the rural areas, those that we claim we are here this week for them. What are we doing about them? What kind of interventions are we designing for them? I would like this week to be a week for you to reflect and think about them. Because these challenges, the CCC, are here. Ukraine and Russia war is unfolding every day. The ripple effect, the contagious effect in their economies is, I remember Museveni said, you guys, if you can't eat bread, kula muhogo. Allah. And people scorned him. But he was saying that, he was making sense. Why do we have to eat bread while we have muhogo, which is very nutritious, by the way. And most of us grew eating those muhogo. When we came to town, that's when we knew bread. What is wrong with eating ndizi and mtori? Anyway, that's a conversation. I usually have such conversation in economic policy debates, and what are the priorities countries can do and think in terms of what to deal with the current economic shocks. The last point, the last but one point is system change, futuristic thinking. And I want to talk about this because this is very important, especially for CSOs that are governing, are aiming to raise resources. We are more reactionary than anticipatory. We react to things. COVID, hey, now what do we do with COVID? But we have never spent time to think, what if pandemic happens? What do we do? We react. When something happens, that's when we start organizing ourselves. Oh, here, do this, here, do that. Ah, no, call someone. Here, they fix that. Hey, go to that. But have we spent time to think and anticipate the future? CSO, you need to think of the future. System change. Anticipate the future. Plan accordingly. Very important. And finally, let me talk of the buzzword in town, the Continental Free Trade Area. I remember one time, and I won't mention where, when, with my previous employer, I came to Tanzania to talk about CFTA, and I met mheshimiwa mmoja, kaniambia, we Anton, wewe acha kutuletea, we dona umekutuma uje utuletee, iko hatutaki, situlobi. Even when you presented simulations to show where the country, I'm glad the country finally ratified. And I went around countries to present to trade ministers what our simulations were saying, the benefit the country stands to gain. But what I want to bring to CSO, this is a very important area. Right now, they've just ratified a protocol on youth and women. And as I said, population kubwa ya Afrika ni vijana. They've passed a protocol on youth and women. Civil society, we tend to focus on, this is an opportunity. I was involved in developing national strategy for Kenya, for the government of Kenya. The priority on their CFTA strategy and implementation plan, which I have, and I was a part of the team that developed it, is youth and women. How do they tap and bring more youth into the trade sector? And the government is putting so much effort and emphasis on that. Civil societies are pushing that agenda as well in that space. What are we doing? And Tanzania is the giant of this region. Where is the role of our young people? Civil society is an opportunity that you can tap. This week, think about it. So there are so many, and just to unpack, I think I've mentioned, prioritize women and young youth involvement, very important. CSO, build capacity. Wanauza ukienda kule kwa wananchi, maembe yanaoza, machungwa yanaoza. Wakati nyanya na vitunguu Nairobi, 40% of food basket of food in Nairobi is coming from Tanzania and Uganda. We eat food. Me, I don't, okay, sometimes I eat my Kenyan, but Arusha, shato. Lete mchele bana. Lete samaki, ile kichwa kubwa imejaa hivi. I eat Tanzanian food for the last 5 years that I've been living in Nairobi. It's crossing. Na Kenya kuingiza chakula hakuna kodi. Tax free. It's an opportunity. CSOs, wananchi wenu wanalima, wajue kutafuta masoko wapi. You can galvanize and help them. You want to bring change because kimbizana na serikali on the one hand, but also wape watu pesa mfukoni, watakuwa na power ya kukusupport. Wakiwa na njaa hata ukipiga kelele utakuwa unaleta I'm being constricted, but no one can listen because they're hungry. But creating opportunities for our people is important, and that's part of people-centered development. Policy influence, labor movement, this is what CFTA is advocating. Feel free to read more about it. Now, my last but one, I think this is, yes, last but one. Is sustainability possible for CSOs? Is it possible? Is it possible? Can we deliver? Question number one. And this week I want you to reflect this question. Can we deliver CSOs? Au tunaandika tu Kiingereza kizuri kwenye paper, actual implementation tunaanza kuitana kwenye vikao. Wewe bana, tunafahamiana bana, acha mambo yako bana, si ndio? Can we deliver? If we want to talk about sustainability, we should be able to deliver and deliver results. Are we flexible? We have dogma thinking, dogmatic thinking, fixated mindset, not growth mindset. Are we flexible? Can we reinvent ourselves? This week you are here. Can you reinvent yourself? Go back to where you came from with a different way of thinking and seeing things to reinvent yourself. You talk of sustainability, you need to be able to reinvent yourself. What about integrity, honesty, and transparency? Are we people of high integrity? Are we honest? Are we transparent? You talk of sustainability, if you don't have those, just go home, kunywa chai, lala, amka cheza na wajukuu, maisha ende. There's no sustainability if you're not of high integrity, if you're not honest and not transparent. Think about social enterprise. I've just discussed CFTA, social enterprise, private market driven, and I'm glad to see private sector here. Think about creating thriving enterprises for our wananchi to benefit from. We are talking of sustainability, that's very important. Are we compliant? Do we comply to the rules and regulations? Because yes, we might not like the government constricting us, but there are rules, and rules are meant to be followed, right? Are we compliant? We are thinking of sustainability, but then we should think of compliance. What about funding and independence? Now here, I want to challenge, it's a very delicate area. Because these days, one time I was in Kigali in a panel, donors on the floor, and then I said, I was very bold, and later they followed and said, yeah, young man, you're too bold, slow down. Said, we want to talk of true development, give me an open check, let me decide what I do. Where? Paliwaka, unamwambia donor akupe open check. How is that possible? I said the same thing during NORAD convened conversation about rethinking development for Africa in Nairobi, where most donors were in the room. And I said the same thing, give us open check. Let us decide the agenda for Africa. Africans' problems will be solved by Africans. Tanzanian problems will be solved by Tanzanians. We want our partners to come in to help. 1945 World War II, Marshall Plan. Germany was devastated, was it not? Americans, they created Marshall Plan. Where is Germany today? We're not saying no to development partners. We welcome them. We want to work with them, but we want them to support our cause, not their cause. But that's a very delicate area, because dona nakupa pesa na kwamba mimi nataka ufanye kwenye hii eneo, kwenye malaria, si ndio? Wewe sasa unafikiria kulipa mshahara. Francis, that's the problem of CEOs and EDs. Anafikiria kila mwezi inabidi alipe mshahara. Can we do malaria? Even if malaria was not a priority. Suddenly anakuwa malaria champion. He has never been trained on malaria. But because donor anampa pesa on malaria, but the beauty about philanthropies and donors, that they are also changing, that landscape is changing. They are becoming more aware on the need to also engage, to know what they are supporting. Results-driven development, defined by partners and finding mutual ground of working together. Very important. But most importantly, where are the Bill Gates of Africa? Where are the Bill Gates philanthropy, African philanthropy? Because we keep complaining, donors come, they dictate this, but because they're giving you money, surely. What do you expect? I give you money and they tell me what to do. Are you crazy? Not possible. You want to dictate your own, raise your own money. Where are the African philanthropy? Charity begins at home. For how long? For the last 6-7 decades, we have been donor dependent. Are we going to continue like that until 2-3 generations, 4 generations from now? it's about time for Africa to think. Civil society, you have a role to play in changing and shaping that conversation at grassroots levels. And before I finish, I want to ask you a question. What can we do with what we have? It's not about money from donors. We have intellectual capital. We have social capital. We have social networks. What can we do with what we have? Allow me to stop there. Thank you very much.
Makofi zaidi tafadhali kwake Dr. Anthony. Dr. Anthony, tatizo la kwanza la presentation yako ni Kiingereza kingi. au nasema uongo? Lakini je, yeye ana Kiswahili kingi? Kwa tunampongeza tu hata hivyo, si ndio? Anyway, leo bwana tunazungumza ukweli wa mambo mengi sana. Na ukweli huo utatokana na presentation hii ama wasilisho hili ambalo tumelisikia. Kwa kiwango ambacho tumeelewa. Na moja kati ya maagizo ambayo nilikuwa nayo, labda sikupata nafasi ya kusoma, ilikuwa ni kwamba kama utakuwa una challenge ya lugha kidogo, changamoto ya lugha, na kama unavyoona matangazo yetu mengi hapa yote ya Kiingereza, hebu jibanze na mtu ambaye kidogo anaweza kuwa na kunongoneza pale ambapo labda kuna neno moja kubwa ambalo alikuwa analizungumzia mwenyewe dokta. Tukienda kufanya mawasilisho kwa mawaziri linakutia changamoto. Kwa hiyo si vibaya ukiweza kujenga mahusiano na mwenzako ambaye ataweza kukutafsiria zaidi. Sasa